Okay, it's time to discuss UFC 312 that happened in Sydney, Australia last night. And just as I expected, this card was extremely underwhelming. I can't say it didn't deliver because I didn't expect it to deliver anything, as I put on my first video that it's one of the worst pay per views ever. But there were still a couple of moments that were worth tuning in for and made this card, fun. It there were, as we see, it's a usual trend that prelim fights are delivering more exciting moments than made card fights. But I guess that's what you get when you put Jake Matthews and Justin Tafa on the main card. But yeah, we're going to discuss some quick thoughts and reactions to the UFC 312 card, because there weren't a lot of them, but let's get into it. So, first fight we got to discuss, main event, Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland. Now, I really just think to myself, how did Sean Strickland beat Israel Adesanya? From what I've seen from the last Sean Strickland's last two performances versus Paulo Costa and Dricus du Plessis, is he has no sense of urgency, and he just walks his opponent down and teeps a couple shots every couple minutes to get out the decision. His fighting style is doing just enough to win by decision, to win fights. But you can't just always do that when you're in a title fight and you're given an opportunity to rematch a guy that beat you in an absolute war and then fight even worse than that fight. Like, this performance by Sean Strickland was even worse than what we saw at UFC 297. And Sean Strickland, just very unimpressive. He doesn't really do anything on offense. He tries to do just enough within the rounds to squeeze out a decision win. But when you're given this opportunity, you got to go after it. That's what his coaches kept on saying after each round. You got to get after it and, make Dricus respect you. But sure, he threw a couple strikes every couple minutes, but he just walks his opponent down. And Dricus, I had a feeling he was going to get it done, and he did. But not too impressive by Dricus either. But Dricus was, lighting him up with a couple head kicks that looked really nice. And then, of course, in round 4, Dricus gave Sean Strickland a little punch to the nose that ended up breaking Sean Strickland's nose. And I already had Dricus up 3 rounds at that point. But after that blow, of course, that really, cemented the end of the fight for Dricus, unless Sean Strickland, turned it up a notch to try and get a Hail Mary. And respect to Sean, though, with the toughness and grit of fighting through a broken nose with the blood dripping down his face. And, it looked kind of tough. But you got to do more than that to, get a title in the UFC. Sean Strickland, he came up in the UFC definitely finishing people. He definitely has, you see his highlights. He did finish people coming up in the UFC in the Apex and in these Fight Night main events. But seeing him up against the big dogs of the middleweight division, just not impressed with this guy. He talks a lot of shit before fights. We're going to the death touch, man, and let's give the fans what they want. That was a terrible impression. But you hear what I'm saying. He talked a lot of shit, but, barely, when the actual fight comes, it's just a very boring fight. And you don't see Sean Strickland really giving the war that he, advertises on paper. It's more of him just selling fights and his very crazy way of acting that, gets people to tune in. So, yeah, from Sean Strickland, let, up-and-coming middleweights take Sean Strickland's ranking. I don't think Sean Strickland gets another title shot for a while, maybe ever again. I think this was his last chance at getting a UFC title. I think for the rest of his career, he's going to be riding in the rankings as a gatekeeper. And, yeah, Dricus, honestly, also not really that impressive of a win, but still won, did what he needed to, and didn't really display a lot of his grappling. He kind of kept it on the feet, trying to respect Sean Strickland's packed and just strike with him. Was doing those kicks to the head. And yeah, let's just move on to what we all want next, and that's Khamzat Chimaev versus Dricus. It was actually mad funny how Khamzat Chimaev tweeted that this fight was the biggest bullshit and then tags Dricus. So I'm extremely excited for that fight, and whenever they announce it, hopefully it's later this year and maybe the fall. The build-up, the trash talk. Khamzat Chimaev is probably the most dangerous first-round threat in the entire UFC. The questions we'll always ask in a Khamzat Chimaev fight is, how will he look in rounds 3, 4, 5? If the fight goes past the first 2 rounds, what will his gas tank look like? Will he still be as dominant on the ground? But he's the most dangerous threat in the first round. The way we saw him, what he did to Robert Whittaker, what he did to Kevin Holland. The guys to take him to the distance were Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns. But Khamzat Chimaev is looking scarier than ever. The boogeyman, the wolf. And I want to see this guy. I was about to say something mad sus, so I'm just going to keep it at that. Let him go after Dricus. Feed Dricus to the wolf. And Dricus, I think, said he's going to try to wrestle with Khamzat. I think it could be competitive. Although I do see Khamzat Chimaev just absolutely mauling Dricus du Plessis. But maybe it goes past the 2 rounds and Dricus, could stick with it with Khamzat Chimaev. So very excited for that fight. That really should have happened next, but whatever. We got this finally out of the way. Finally. And we can move on to one of the more exciting middleweight title fights we've ever seen. Now, that's all I got to say on that. Next up, Zhang Weili versus Tatiana Suarez. Zhang Weili, absolute masterclass versus Tatiana Suarez. I was so impressed each and every round. She came in, her takedown defense, controlling Tatiana on the ground, because Tatiana is supposed to be a wrestling savant. But Zhang Weili just outclassed her in every kind of way. Struck with her, gave her a bunch of nasty bruises, bruised up her face, and Zhang Weili looks like she's in a league of her own. And I'm not so familiar with the women's weight classes, but from what I've seen from her from UFC 300, and now she's dominating everyone. One of the best women champions ever, probably top 3 at this point after such a performance against an 11-0 fighter. And I say put her up against the division that's above her. Let her move up and try to become double champion and really cement her legacy as one of the greatest women's champions ever. Right, strawweight might be 115, and the next division is 125, the bantamweight women's division. I don't know, someone maybe let me know what exactly the weight, how the weight is with the women's divisions. But yeah, Zhang Weili, absolute masterclass. I predicted her to win, and that was just amazing by Zhang Weili. Next up, Justin Tafa versus Thaleson Teixeira. Now, Thaleson Teixeira I saw him come out, and I'm just like, this dude's scary. Because, of course, I wasn't so familiar with him. This was his debut. He came from the Dana White Contender Series. And this guy is huge. And when he came out and they announced that when they were giving us a quick look at him as he was about to enter the octagon, they said this guy is 7-0, 100% finish rate, finished all his opponents in the first round. And I could see why. This guy's tall, he's got length, he's huge. And I really think he's going to be a problem in the heavyweight division. And look at what he did. He came in there and he dog-walked Justin Tafa. He dog-walked him. He pressed him up against the cage, and in the first 40 seconds of the fight, says he finished him in 35 seconds, he gives him this nasty elbow to the face. I don't know if he even broke his nose, but gives him this nasty elbow that just nasty, that demolishes Justin Tafa's face. Justin Tafa falls down. Thaleson delivers a couple more shots to him on the ground, and then the ref stops it. And people could look at that as early, but I think it was pretty much a done deal. Thaleson Teixeira to do that, and in that way, this guy could be a real problem in the heavyweight division. He's dangerous. Just the way he looked, the size difference. He made Justin Tafa look small, and then comes in there and delivers a nasty shot to the head and finishes him. So we'll see what happens with Taliesin Teixeira next. I saw some people saying that Justin Tafa should just be cut from the UFC. So whatever, I don't really know what's going on with him. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that was your feature fight for UFC 312. So yeah, that was that fight. This fight was actually pretty entertaining. Jimmy Crute versus Rodolfo Bellato. This was actually one of the more exciting fights on this card. Absolute dogfight between Jimmy Crute and Bellato. In the first round, I thought that Jimmy Crute was going to just dominate this guy. Jimmy Crute seemed to be, dominating him everywhere with the punches, controlling him on the ground, doing some ground and pound. It looked like this was going to be, a dog walk of Jimmy Crute with Bellato, but Bellato went stuck in there. He stuck with it, and there were some great striking exchanges. This guy, Jimmy Crute, with his mullet, pretty big for a light heavyweight. He looked pretty scary. And I guess coming into this fight, there was, he almost retired 2 years ago, but ended up returning, and he looks pretty good. I don't know, maybe some people will say that he won this fight, but it ended up as a draw. Also, I really enjoyed seeing Jimmy Crute give Bellato these little uppercuts when they were in the clinch in the pocket, doing these little 1-2 uppercuts. I really like that with his... And he was throwing some very powerful shots that didn't land anywhere, but they look strong. These giant overhooks he was throwing that if landed could rock a guy. So, yeah, that was a great fight. It ended up as a draw. Curious to know what people thought, if they felt like Jimmy Crute won or... And also, Bellato had Alex Pereira in his corner. This was a very star-studded night for, some of UFC legends to be in the corners. We had Alex Pereira cornering Bellato, Charles Oliveira cornering, what was his name? Gabriel Santos, Volk, and Ilya. So very star-studded night for cornermen. Jake Matthews versus Francisco Prado. Did what he needed to win that fight. Kind of a boring fight. Ended in decision. Gabriel Santos, I believe he dominated Jack Jenkins on the ground. I'll be honest, wasn't really paying attention to that fight. Yeah, these were all decisions. Wayne Khan gets it done. Joker versus Batman. And then Alexandre Topuria versus Colby Thickness. And Alexandre Topuria, great debut for a UFC debut. He looks really good. Clearly, he possesses the same technique and skill set and movements as Ilia Topuria. The way Ilia Topuria drops back, has, similar head movement, the way he throws his punches. It seems like he could be a real problem in the bantamweight division. Great takedown defense. He looks great everywhere, honestly. And we'll see how he progresses with his UFC career. And he had some clean-looking punches, very similar to Ilya. I just kept on seeing a splitting image of Ilya in the way that he fights. Which, of course, they're brothers. They train together. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Alexandre Topuria continues to progress in his UFC career. But that was a great-looking debut. Suplexed Colby Thickness on his head top. Suplexed him. So, very impressive debut by Alexandre Topuria. Yeah. And then, nothing really much to say on these early prelims, but two very exciting fights to open up the card. Rongzu versus Cody Steele. They had a Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje type moment where they were slugging it out in the last round. Rongzu ends up taking Cody Steele's undefeated record. So, yeah, that was an exciting fight to open up the card. And then Quillian Salkield, I hope I said that right, beats Anshul Jubilee in 19 seconds. This guy in his debut goes out there and knocks out this guy with a straight hook, laser down to the face in 19 seconds. And, of course, people are going to maybe say it was a little bit too early. Give this guy at least 2-3 more seconds to kind of defend himself. He was, even after the ref called the fight, Anshul Jubilee was already grabbing at Quillan's legs. It looked really bad from the way he got dropped. But maybe it was a little bit early to call. But either way, it was a very exciting way to open up the card. Maybe had me thinking that I was in for a pleasant surprise with the card, but didn't play out that way. So yeah, that was one of two exciting finishes within the first 40 seconds of a fight. And yeah, those are my thoughts on UFC 312.